The apartments appropriated to him were the two I have just mentioned, with a dressing room, dining room, drawing room, and billiard room. The latter was built by Sir George Cockburn and was the only well-proportioned room in which Longwood could boast. After all these chambers were exhibited and commented on by Napoleon, he proceeded with us to the kitchen, where he desired Pierron, the confectioner, to send in some creams and bonbons for Miss Betsy. Thence we went to the larder, where he directed our attention to a sheep that was hanging up and said laughingly, "Regardez voilà, un mouton pour mon dîner, dont il a fait une lanterne." And sure enough, it was so, the French servants having placed a candle in its lean carcass through which the light shone. After we had gone all over the rooms, he conducted us to those of Madame Montland and introduced me to a little stranger, the Countess's baby, only then 6 weeks old, and which he began dangling so awkwardly that we were in a state of terror lest he should let it fall. He occasionally diverted himself by pinching the little creature's nose and chin until it cried. When we quizzed him for his gaucherie in handling the child, he assured us he had often nursed the little king of Rome when he was much younger than the little Lily. Before terminating our visit, Napoleon took us over the garden and grounds which surrounded his house. Nothing could exceed the dreariness of the view which presented itself from them, and a spectator unaccustomed to the savage and gigantic scenery of St. Helena could not fail to be impressed by its singularity. On the opposite side, the eye rested on a dismal and rugged-looking mountain, whose stupendous side was here and there diversified by patches of wild samphire, prickly pears, and aloes, serving to break but slightly the uniform sterility of the iron-colored rocks, the whole range of which exhibited little more than huge apertures of caverns and overhanging cliffs, which in the early years of the colonization of the island afforded shelter to herds of wild goats. I remember hearing Madame Bertrand tell my mother that one of Napoleon's favorite pastimes was to watch the clouds as they rolled over the highest point of that gigantic mountain, and as the mists wreathed themselves into fantastic draperies around its summit, sometimes obscuring the valleys from sight and occasionally stretching themselves out far to the sea. His imagination would take wing and indulge itself in shaping out the future from those vapory nothings. As a diversion to close the day, the emperor proposed a ride in his Irish jaunting car. Our horses were accordingly sent on to Hut's Gate, the residence of Madame Bertrand, and accompanied by Napoleon, we set off at a hard gallop. I always was and still am the greatest coward in a carriage, and of all vehicles, that jaunting car seemed to me the best one calculated to inspire terror. It was driven by the fearless Archambault, with unbroken cape horses, 3 abreast, round that most dangerous of roads called the Devil's Punch Bowl. The party occupying the side nearest the declivity seemed almost hanging over the precipice, while the others were apparently crushed against the gigantic walls formed by the perpendicular rock. These were drives which seemed to inspire Bonaparte with mischievous pleasure. He added to my fright by repeatedly assuring me that the horses were running away and that we should be all dashed to pieces. I shall never forget the joy I experienced at arriving in safety at Madame Bertrand's and finding myself once more mounted on my quiet pony Tom. After Napoleon had been on the island a few months, some newspapers arrived containing anecdotes of him and all that occurred during his stay at the Friars. Amongst other sottises, stupid things, was a letter written by the Marquess de M, in which he described all the romping games that had taken place between Napoleon and our family, such as Blindman's Bluff, the sword scenes, and ending his communication by observing that Miss Betsy was the wildest little girl he had ever met, and expressing his belief that the young lady was fall crazy. This letter had been translated into the German and English journals. My father was much enraged at my name thus appearing and wished to call the Marquess to an account for his ill nature, but my mother's intercessions prevailed, and she obtained an ample apology from the Marquess. On hearing of the affront that Miss Betsy had received from the vieux imbecile, Stupid old guy, that Napoleon generally denominated him. He requested Dr. O'Meara would call at the Briars on his way to St. James Valley with a message to me, which was to let me know how I might revenge myself. It so happened that the Marquess prided himself on the peculiar fashion of his wig, to which was attached a long queue. This embellishment to his head, Napoleon desired me to burn off with caustic. I was always ready for mischief, and in this instance had double inducement on the Emperor's promise to reward me on the receipt of the pigtail with the prettiest fan Mr. Solomon's shop contained. Fortunately, I was prevented indulging in this most hoydenish trick by the remonstrances of my mother. The next time I saw the Emperor, his first exclamation was, "Eh bien, Mademoiselle Betsy, tu obéis mes ordres et gagner l'Avental?" Did you obey my orders and get the pigtail? In reply, I made a great merit of being too dutiful a daughter to disobey my mother. However much my inclinations prompted me to revenge the insult, he pinched my ear in token of approval and said, "Ah, Miss Betsy, tu commences à être sage. You're starting to get smart." He then called Dr. O'Meara and asked him if he had procured the fan. The doctor replied that there was none pretty enough. I believe I looked disappointed on perceiving which Napoleon, with his usual good nature, consoled me with the promise of something prettier, and he kept his word. In a few days I received a ring of brilliants, forming the letter N, surmounted by a small eagle. The only revenge I took on the Marquess was by relating an anecdote of his greedy propensity, which diverted Napoleon very much. He was very fond of cauliflowers, which were rare vegetables in this island. Dining with us one day at the Briars, his aide-de-camp, Captain Gore, had omitted to point out to him that there was some at table, and it was only when about to be removed that the Marquess espied the retreat dish. His rage was most amusing, and with much gesticulation he exclaimed, "Bête, pourquoi ne m'as-tu pas dit qu'il y avait des choux-fleurs? Darn! Why didn't you tell me there was cauliflowers?"